Hi. It's so good to see everybody. It's been fun to connect in the workshops as well as in the breakout rooms. And today we're going to be talking about entrepreneur styles, and this is really what this comes from is years and years of coaching solopreneurs and owner-operators of various kinds of businesses. So my business primarily focuses in helping individuals and small businesses really grow and prosper. And in that, I use type, and it's just been fascinating to me over these last 25 or 30 years to observe how what people do with their types and how do they start to use that and how it expresses in their businesses. Even without knowing anything about type, they're just being themselves. And what I noticed is that different types get hung up at different stages of the business. There's natural growth styles. We'll be talking about that and playing around with that a little bit today. And then also, I've been correlating the kinds of business people start to their personality types, just sort of their natural inclinations and how they function, what they do. So that's been a really fascinating piece of work for me. And what I'd like to know is who's in the room with us today. But here's what I've discovered, as you won't be surprised, is that all types can be found in a wide variety of businesses, and there are some patterns. So I have yet to meet some, people, only certain people in certain kinds of businesses, but there are some patterns I've noticed. All types can succeed or fail in business under different kinds of circumstances and environments. And in fact, it was this kind of observation that first led me to develop the leadership styles that I did a few years back, because I started seeing that there were people who were wildly successful in their careers or in their businesses, and then they would move to a different set of circumstances and be wildly unsuccessful. And I was curious about why that was. And certainly, we don't want to be stereotyping people and saying that someone succeeded or failed because of their style, their types. But it's really interesting when people just are naturally being who they are, their heroic selves. Some of the conditions that they find themselves in are more supportive or less supportive for them. All types are bad managers or micromanagers for different reasons. I'm always fascinated when I work with individuals who are being managed by someone that they don't get on with, and they want to know, is there a type that's a bad manager? And I say, well, it really depends on both parties, because what I have found in my work is that most people don't leave their jobs because of they're not being paid enough, or even that they're not being given the most amazing promotions. It's usually because there's conflict with their manager. They either got a brand new manager in the last 6 months, or they've had an ongoing conflict and they just is unreconcilable and they need to get out. One of the services I offer is outplacement. So when an employer lays off someone, releases them, I help those folks get reemployed. And I always say, the first question is, in the last 6 months, did you get a new manager? And almost always to the person, it is yes. Because in that 6 months, it took about 6 months for that new relationship to show up as being really problematic and unreconcilable. And then the new manager says, you've got to go. Because I think it's the employee's issue. All types are delegators. They have different kinds of tasks and responsibilities. And this is really important, that all types keep too much decision-making power for different reasons. And this was a really fascinating piece for me to discover, is that when we are looking at who's a micromanager or who's a good manager or who's a bad manager, there's no particular correlation to type, because all of these different factors start to play into that. So I'm going to review a little bit about, some descriptions that I created. They're based in the similar kind of structure as the leadership styles that I have put together. And then I'm going to break it out into a bit more detail. We're going to do a couple different exercises today. So we have efficient structure entrepreneurs. And if you are not familiar with leadership styles, what efficient structure types have in common is they all are thinking judging types. And so we bring together the decision-making function of logical decision-making as a group. And they tend to bring a corporate energy to their projects. They're typically drawn toward environments where they can create, implement, and manage systems and standards. These are things we would expect actually from extroverted thinking types. And what we also find is that they thrive in roles where their practical and aspirational logical systems and expertise is in demand. So they go to places, they go to work to places like that, but they also then create things like that in their own business. And what I've discovered is no matter the business, it's all about systematizing and organizing their environment for these entrepreneurs. So the services they provide are about organizing and systematizing for other people. They tend to do it for their own businesses. They find themselves seeking that structure and sort of implementing it wherever they can go because it's what makes sense to them. And this is one of the things that I talk quite a bit in my work around type bias, our natural type biases, because when we are just out there being our heroic selves and sometimes not so doing such a great job of being heroic, when I refer to heroic, I'm referring to Beebe's model of the archetypes. And when we are out there being our heroic selves, oftentimes what that means is we're trying to recreate the world in our own image. Because it works so well for me, why wouldn't it work for everybody else? And so we go about trying to recreate the world over and over and over again in our own image. And I broke these into two different groups. These are our stabilizing administrators and our mobilizing strategists. And so I want to say this is still a work in progress. I have been working on this book and materials for quite some time. And this last year I did quite a bit of work with it. So I'm going to be asking you a couple of questions to clarify a few things. But what I've discovered is that our ISTJs and ESTJs are stabilizing administrators. They're classic business managers. They tend to start product-based businesses. And that's primarily because of the tangibility of it. And if it doesn't look like a typical manufactured product, what you'll also find is that they've created some kind of a service that's replicable and can be sold sort of as productized. They tend to go for structured growth plans with measurable goals, implement standards and procedures early in development, stabilize operations. For some folks, for some of our stabilizing administrators, those very early stages of rapid growth are not their most favorite comfortable place. And in addition to starting product-based businesses, many of our stabilizing administrators often are drawn to established businesses and buying that or buying a franchise of some kind that has some qualities of systems already built into it. They tend to use industry-related credentials and reliable tools as models for the basis for their services. Now, you will be getting these slides, by the way, and I know you're not going to memorize all this, but some of these things are going to be important later. So pay attention to some of the clues I'm giving you, because I'm going to be asking you some questions that'll start to make these connections. So our mobilizing strategists are our INTJs or ENTJs. And I call them our classic strategic visionaries. They tend to start businesses intended to change paradigms. So to me, paradigms are another form of systems and structures, and they want to change the paradigm that people live in. They tend to also go with structured growth plans with significant landmarks. So whereas our stabilizing administrators are looking for a specific goal, they tend to have goals that are within the let's say 6 to 12 month range for their first year of development. You'll find that mobilizing strategists have landmarks that may go out longer in their timeline. So it might be out 3 and 5 and 10 years. They'll start with a sort of a big vision of what the paradigm they want to change. And when they're close to actualizing their vision, they may need a bigger idea to compel themselves forward. So one of the challenges for our mobilizing strategists is when they don't have that big compelling vision pulling them forward, they sort of lose their energy to do it. So they need to always have that big compelling vision out there. And then they collect credentials. I find I'm always fascinated by the number of credentials that mobilizing strategists tend to have. They have more degrees and certifications to demonstrate all their competency and mastery in field than most other people that I meet. It's always fascinating. There's a couple of other types that tend to collect credentials, but these folks really love them. And they're avid readers, and I think they're all speed readers. I don't know exactly if they really are, but they seem to be able to absorb remarkable amounts of information in books and they like consume them like they're just having a sandwich. And then they'll tell you the list of books they read in the last year. It will be an enormous list of books. Trying to keep up with it, particularly with ENTJ's reading list, is almost impossible for me. I've attempted a couple of times, and it's just too much for me. So does this make sense to you all? Okay, great. So then we have our precise systems entrepreneurs. And again, if you're unfamiliar with my leadership styles, what they have in common is the TP, they're introverted thinking types. And they bring an entrepreneurial energy. And so I'm using entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial energy here, and I want to play around with this language. There's sort of a typical entrepreneurial energy that we associate often with our introverted thinking types. In fact, they're often considered classically the entrepreneurs of the world, because they like to create new things and sort of build on that. So they bring an entrepreneurial energy to their projects and are typically drawn toward environments where they can solve complex challenges. And the more complex, the better for them. They tend to thrive in roles where they get to apply unconventional approaches to solving immediate and systemic problems. And that might mean that it could be a very physical thing. It might be a mechanical, physical complex issue, and it might be sort of unwinding an organization, and understanding what their systems are and then putting it back together. And what I find is that it's all about inventing something that disrupts their industry for these entrepreneurs. So they're looking to change the status quo. They want to shift function. And so then we have our improvising analyzers. Our improvising analyzers are ISTPs and ESTPs. I call both of these groups classic entrepreneurs. I haven't quite figured out the language on how to distinguish them, because they both have that classic entrepreneurial energy, but different. So ESTPs and ISTPs tend to start businesses that solve immediate and practical challenges for living on the planet. And by that, I mean, like, it could be something that's about doing business, but it also could be something that's much more physical in the world. They often turn side gigs into businesses because they grow to meet the demand. So in that responsive nature that we find with extroverted sensing, they may not always have started out with, I'm going to start a business, but all of a sudden they'll find themselves in a business because they're good at what they do. And they tend to be, if they are good at what they do, then the demand grows, and they all of a sudden they say, oh, I have a business now. They tend to enjoy the sales and negotiations aspect of businesses. And this is true even when they are working as employees. You'll find that they enjoy negotiating with people to really sort out. And it gets back to why I call this whole group precise systems entrepreneurs, because, excuse me, it's negotiating to find that precise, getting into that exact agreement. They rely on their ability to solve complex problems and produce tangible results to demonstrate value. And then we have our INTPs and ENTPs. They tend to notice, and what I find with them is they tend to notice market trends, and we often talk about extroverted intuition as sort of pulling things out of the air. And I find this with the entrepreneur aspect of it, is that they're interested in finding things that are going to be cutting edge in business and address them, allowing their interest in new trends to guide growth. So their growth pattern is not very linear. It's exploratory in that process. One of the challenges I find for these folks is that they may perpetually reinvent their business to satisfy their need for new experiences. And this plays into those patterns in growth that we see. They rely on the ability to quickly read situations and anticipate what's needed next to keep groups engaged. And that's that ability to kind of read the room, read the group, read the trends, and continue to work with it and dance with it. So then we have our empathetic harmony entrepreneurs, and what these folks all have in common is FJ, or extroverted feeling. These types all tend to bring a caretaking energy to their projects and are typically drawn toward environments where they can improve the physical, emotional, and spiritual needs of the people involved. It's always fun to see, and I find this true even with our ISFJs and ESFJs, that there's a spiritual quality to that. It's the bringing people together in that community that often lends to that. Thrive in roles where they are attuned with people and can provide practical and aspirational advice regarding human relations. And no matter what they call their services or what they call their products, what you'll find is that with our empathetic harmony entrepreneurs is they want people to get along. They really just want people to get along and get along better. And so they might introduce a tool or a resource or be coaches, whatever their process is, whatever their offering is as support through their business. Eventually what it does is help people get on better. And no matter the business, is all about getting people to get along better for these entrepreneurs. So we have protecting caretakers and the visionary mentors. Our ISFJs and ESFJs, we often think of them as our classic host and hostesses, but this is, to me, is actually a little bit of a limiting idea in terms of it's not just about hosting someone for an event. They host you in their business as well. It's like, welcome into my environment, and there's a warmth quality to that. They tend to start businesses that attend to the personal needs of clients. And it may not be individual coaching, for example, but it is attentive to what are the individual needs of the people who make up the group. They rely on steady incremental growth, relationship building, and reliable models for development. I find that many ISFJs and ESFJs look for a model. Many of us look for models like the Myers-Briggs or other kinds of things, but it's finding a system or a model that they can really rely on. They know it has a longevity and depth to it. They create clear goals and guidelines for operations that stabilize the flow of business, and they lean on their personal experience and relationships to build loyalty. And this is a piece that we find in most of our SF types anyway, is the loyalty piece is important to both themselves, the loyalty to their clients as well as clients to them, and building that in. And our INFJs and ENFJs, I call them our business mavens. And maven is sort of a connector and networker of all kinds of different seemingly disparate parts. They tend to start businesses that support people in expressing their true selves, professionally or personally. And they tap into current and future networks to grow business. So we see both with both of our protecting caretaker and visionary mentor, it's about the people they know in the beginning and the people that they grow and develop their business with, that really is central to what they do. They create mission-based businesses based on compelling future. With compelling futures that guide them to the next level of growth. And they lean on the ability to create processes and models that help people articulate and act on their goals. So, what you'll find is that INFJs and ENFJs want people to really get clear about, who they are, so they can go and act on that in the future and like have these other grand visions for themselves. Sometimes their desire to have other people to have a grand vision is not necessarily met well by other people, because not everybody understands or relates to that grand vision. Then we have our personal authenticity entrepreneurs. These types that bring a passionate energy, and passion is really core. What we have in common here is the feeling and perceiving, or introverted feeling. And passion is a key word, I think, for all of our introverted feeling types. They bring a passionate energy to their projects and are typically drawn toward environments where they can alleviate the suffering for an underserved population. And I'm always fascinated by particularly our introverted feeling types here, our personal authenticity entrepreneurs, in that I used to teach locally for a program called the Women's Small Business Program. And I always knew the types that were we would do type as part of it, but I would sort of, play around with figuring out what people's types were. The personal authenticity types inevitably wanted to price their services so that anybody could afford it, or they were more likely to have sliding scales. And they were often looking for populations that they didn't think were being served. And that can include, by the way, anything that's alive. It could be the environment, could be plants, could be animals, it could be people, it could be subsets of people. There's really lots and lots of ways to look for populations or entities that are underserved in a way that our personal authenticity types want to serve. They tend to thrive in roles where they're fully aligned. So their creative capacity is completely open to address the immediate and integral issues. And this is that alignment with themselves, that core, those core passionate values for themselves, so that they can then use all of their other energy to go out and do good things in the world. And it's all about alleviating the suffering of the most vulnerable. And you'll see this even in professional expressions, oftentimes, of people looking for ways to support the vulnerable. We have our crusading motivators and our healing advocates. So our ISFPs and ESFPs are often crusaders in their own way. They may not be like, evangelical sort of crusaders, but they're crusading in that they're really trying to serve their population. They tend to start businesses that serve the immediate needs of the vulnerable, grow by responding to a series of small and large emergencies. And I find with ISFPs and ESFPs, they may take a long winding path to acknowledge that they have an actual business. And this is similar, we saw a little bit with our ISTPs and ESTPs, is that they sort of grow a little bit at a time, and they keep responding and keep responding. And if they're good at what they do, people keep saying, please, please come more, do more. And all of a sudden they have a business, and they may not always acknowledge it until it's taking up a lot of their time. They rely on their physical ability to respond to the needs of clients. And that might be something with their hands, it might be physically with their bodies, it might be physically being present. You'll find that these folks are often on the front line of whatever population they're serving. They want to be on the front line with folks in a more of an even with them rather than leading. In our healing advocates are classic coaches. In fact, the entire coaching industry, I was created by and for ENFPs, I'm pretty sure. Some people don't really remember when coaching wasn't a thing to have as a profession, but it was really developed out of the necessity that many governments were regulating anybody who wanted to call themselves a counselor, and you suddenly had to be a licensed therapist. And so coaching became a certification at that period of time. And I'm pretty sure that all the people who were the first coaches out there were ENFPs, because it seems like they're the biggest population of people who claim coaching and are particularly certified as coaches. Tend to start mission-based businesses and tended to realign people to their core selves. They tend to grow by engaging others in their passions, so in their own individual passions. So healing advocates don't necessarily want, they may have passions they want you to get engaged with, but they really want you to find your passions and get engaged and just go do that. And need to educate clients. They often need to educate clients in the early phase of business to establish the legitimacy of the concept. And that's because they're often working in things that are not necessarily are not immediately accessible to other people. So sometimes they're working in areas that are more esoteric. And they rely on their ability to deeply connect with clients and ignite their passions. Okay, so I have a little exercise I want to do next, and what I want to do is just open it up to see, do you have questions? I just covered a lot of information. Do you have any questions or clarifications before we get into the other material? And you can just unmute yourself and speak up.
No question, Markey, just a remark. It sounds so true. I mean, I've been reviewing a couple of people I know and myself, and you're right on target.
Oh, okay, good. You know, sometimes, you know, when we're writing in the void, we don't always know if we're if we're speaking to anybody. That's great. Any other questions, comments, clarifications? Marianne, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just what Jean-Luc said. I thought this morning, I don't know whether I should go to this one or not, just for me, because as an ISFP, everything you said was true. But when I look at the people that I've had good relationships with over the many years that I've worked, I'm looking at all these groups and thinking, you have hit the nail on the head. Just, that's tremendous, really. I'm very, very impressed with your information. Absolutely.
Okay, great.
Definitely. Absolutely.
Great to know. It's always helpful for me, particularly with ISFPs and INFPs, because it's an area where I feel like I'm really stretching, and I'm never quite sure, like, did I tap into that? So thank you for those comments.
Oh, absolutely. I fell into everything, and we've moved. I just give you, I don't want to take a lot of everybody's time, but we've just moved to another province. I moved to an island, and I'm lost because everything that I did once I retired, the connections called me, you know, in the city that we lived in. I did not pursue the business. They kept calling me. No one's calling me here. No one knows me. I'm in another province. So it's very interesting. So what you were saying, I just hit it right on for sure. Definitely.
Very nice. Excellent. All right, great. Any other comments or questions?
I'd like to echo that it felt like it very much hit the nail on the head. My first job was I was a journalist that reported on startups, and so I interviewed a lot of entrepreneurs and was going to a lot of like presentations with business people, and this was kind of when I was learning type, and so I was always trying to think about what type they might be. And I've always, as an ENFJ, I very much related to your characterization of the NFJ one. I mean, obviously you would know them, but I feel like a lot of times when you're talking about business, there's bias where people think that it's thinking, or at least that's what I've noticed online. I appreciate that you are able to showcase that, you know, in order to be a successful business person, or it requires all of these different types of skills and functions and perspectives. So
very nice. Excellent. Okay, great. So I'm going to talk next about those business growth cycles, and we're going to do a bit of an exercise with that, because it looks like we have a good assortment of types here, and I'm curious about what you think. So I'm assuming most of you are familiar with this cycle. It's a very common cycle that we see, that in any time a business is going through growth, there is the introduction stage where there's lower sales, higher costs, no profits, and then you go into the growth, increasing sales, reducing costs, some profits. And it's in these two stages where we do the most education, big push marketing. You know, we're really having to reach out and let people know what we're doing. And then we reach maturity, where there's constant sales, reducing costs, increasing profits, and then we go into decline, where there's reduced sales, constant costs, and reducing profits. Now, these stages may be longer or shorter depending on you, your business, your environment, the economy. There's lots and lots of things. This is a theoretical model of them all being wonderfully even here. And also remember that some of you might have had multiple phases of your business, or multiple products or services that you've developed and launched, and so they would also go through these kinds of phases. So there's you know, this kind of curve is happening over and over and over again. But what I have found is that there are some patterns to type, and where we tend to hang out, or what our favorite places are. And I'm curious about what you see. So what I'd like you to do is in the chat, please say your name And which of the, and I'll leave this up for you to be able to review. Which of these, and I want you to go with the one that you most prefer. I know some of you will say, oh, I do all of these. And it's true, we all do all of these. But what's the one that you would say is you're like, you love that phase?
Markey, I've got a very quick question. Under
Yep.
growth, it says turnover decreasing. Did you mean increasing there?
Oh, no, that means your staff is probably stabilizing.
Oh, staff turnover. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, yes.
I was thinking money, revenue. Sorry.
So what I have discovered, or this is my theory, this is part of what I'm checking with you right now, is that, so what I'm seeing right now is a lot of folks really liking the startup and growth and not so much the maturity. I think that that's startup and growth seems to be where people tend to be. And then one person saying we're mature relationships with clients. Okay, so this is my theory, is that when we have, so then I'm going to talk some generalities about type preferences as opposed to whole types right now, because it's a little bit easier sometimes to speak in the theory of it right at this stage. So most entrepreneurs, people who I consider really truly solopreneur, entrepreneur types, really love the startup and the growth stages because that's exciting. It's like, you know, it's all the new stuff and it's all juicy and it's wonderful. We're creating and we get to apply all of our wonderful stuff to that, and we get to bring all of our superpowers to that. And many of us, as in the entrepreneurial spirit, can actually resist the maturity stage a bit because it feels like death. It feels like you've stopped growing. And you see, you know, the sort of wild and crazy growth of you know, tech startups that they do all the startup and growth, and then they sort of get maturity and they sell themselves off, and then the owner goes back and starts another thing and grows it and sells it off, because we often want to delegate the maturity stage to the administrators, you know, people who want to actually do business operations. And what I found was, is that, let me see, I'm just going to double check over here again. What I discovered is that particularly when intuitive types, and I'm seeing a little bit across the board with all types here, what people are saying, that is that right about the point that they get to, like right in here, they get bored. And then they feel like they have to do something else. And my hypothesis is that while we have some folks who are in the sensing types who are saying they like the growth stage, my sense is they like the growth stage right in here where it's starting to hit into maturity, because that's where things start to stabilize a bit more. Now, we do see that in growth, there is some stabilizing going on, but it's really in the later stages of this. So I think that these could actually be sliced up into even more finer layers or levels of growth. And that it's in this first startup phase that I think that particularly extroverted intuition is the most excited. It's all brand new. The possibilities are wide open. There's no limits on anything. And then we move into here, and you're starting to see some things, some tangible rewards for what you're doing. And then you move into here and you can kind of maintain. Now, I know some of you have been on the planet for longer than I have, and some of you have been in business for longer than I have, but I've been in business for 30 years now. I started very young in business. And I have had multiple stages of, in fact, going into decline and then reinventing. And I find myself that right about in here, I'm an ENFJ, right about in here, I start to get a little bored. And if I feel like I want to cruise for a while, I do. But one of the things that I found really fascinating is that this little comment right here, this is a summary that I got out of a couple of articles in Forbes magazine. And most owners of businesses in decline are unaware. And this was really fascinating because many of us don't realize we're in decline until we're in decline, like until we're well into decline. But as I think that as entrepreneurs, we tend to want to stay here because we think this is the place where we're really excited. If we've been in business for a long time, there's an inevitability to the maturity simply because we've been doing what we've been doing for a long time. You know, like Marianne even said, you know, she had people who were just contacting her. She wasn't really creating new things so much as she was doing what she did well, and she kept doing it and people kept contacting her. And then there's a point when it changes, and either you move to a new location, what you're offering is no longer desired or needed in the economy, and it starts to decline. So I'd like to just open it up to discussion because I want to hear your feedback about what I've just said. This is a working theory for me, and please comment and give me your feedback. You can just take yourself off mute and comment.
Hi, hi, Markey. This is Doris. I'd like to say, first of all, thank you. This is awesome. I also feel very seen, and I also wonder, but maybe I am other types as well. Anyway, so I've been in business for myself for going on 13 years, and I started typing out a comment, but I haven't really thought it through. So I'm just going to say it like, I'm getting bored, not even when the business is super successful as in I'm making lots of money, but when I feel like, oh, I know that now, let's move on and do something else, right? So I've worked with it. Sorry?
You did right in here, yeah.
Yeah. At the same time, the maturity piece, I made the comment of, I'm sure I'm going to like it when I get to it. And I did used to work as a contractor, a subcontractor, where I didn't have to do any marketing, and the companies just called me and said next week San Francisco, and I would go and fly over there, and that was nice. So I had the new clients and I had the money coming in. And then I also worked as a contractor, as a corporate trainer, where I had an ongoing gig every Monday. So there was a bit of stability there, and I knew that stuff was coming in. And it was a new group every week to train, but it was established, and I felt like I was, providing value, and it was, and that was good. So, yeah, I don't know, no question, just experience. Yeah.
Great. Any other comments? Catherine, you're on mute.
So I am, yeah, sorry. Something I noticed was in the startup phase, there was a lot of extroverting going on in your descriptions. And I think that's why I put for myself growth, because I'm not sure I like that part. I like the new ideas and the excitement of having the new ideas, but actually going out there and pushing them, I'm not so comfortable with. I prefer, some established relationships so you can give them this new stuff that you've developed.
Yeah, right. Thank you for that, Catherine. Actually, it's interesting. One of the things I've been looking at in this is the a very kind of corporate traditional models of what entrepreneurialism looks like, or how people describe it. And of course, these I took a bunch of ideas out of an article from Forbes magazine, which is about very traditional corporate world. And I wondered about this piece here for many of our introverted types, particularly because yes, while you're meeting new people, it doesn't have to be what I call the grip and grin of every kind of going out and meeting hundreds of new people. You are meeting new people, but it doesn't have to be thousands of new people. It can really just be some key contacts in your process that then help you get to that growth stage. Very nice, thank you. Any other comments or feedback on that? Okay. Go ahead.
I just want to say I really like that model, and there's been times, because I've been doing like YouTube for fun for a few years now, and there's definitely been dips in my energy as I kind of reach some sort of maturity, or like I'm kind of been in growth, where I have questioned my motivation has gone down, and I've thought, well, maybe I'm not supposed to be doing this, or like I've read into things like that when I'm curious your thoughts on like, for intuitives or really for anyone, of like how to not be bored by the maturity phase, or how to kind of get yourself over that hump. Yeah.
Well, I know for me, you know, I started in business when I was 26 years old. So I was really young. And for me, the maturity part of I would say sort of growth into maturity is when I had some really established services I was offering and things were good. And then I went into adding employees. In fact, I got to about 8 or 9 years in, actually, we had a team of 7 people. And for me, that matured, part of the way I kept engaged was to grow as a business owner, you know, and there was a point I remember when I realized that my real growth, it was going to continue to be in how I provide my services, but it was more about building the business. And I will say now, I don't have any employees. I have a couple of contractors who do some of my administrative work, because I realized I don't really enjoy that kind of business. I don't enjoy having to manage a bunch of people and be responsible for whether they're generating or not, and all of those sorts of things. It got to be more, it's not why I went into business. And so that was a really good experiment for me to develop into that maturity. And then it changed. We moved locations, and we quickly went into decline. In about a 6-week period, every one of our people left for all different reasons. And so we, being my business partner, who's also my husband now, we stood around in our brand new office looking at a bunch of empty space and saying, now what? And we went back to startup, and we actually reinvented and went through all those stages again. And so we didn't feel comfortable. This maturity place wasn't comfortable for either one of us. He's an INTP and I'm an ENFJ, and neither one of us really wanted to hang out here. So I want to move on because I'm aware of our time, and I want to give you a little bit of a practice to see, do you see some connections in type? So this is a bit of a quiz for you. And I'm going to show you what I consider a core marketing message for a particular, for two, you know, the different types that I went through. And if you don't remember the names of them, that's okay. You can just use letters. So I'm going to put up what I think is a core marketing message. And I want you to tell me what you think that type is. And you can either put it into chat, or you can shout it out, whichever you desire. So this one is based on how their style, tools, and resources will help create and maintain a more harmonious relationships, and thereby have better businesses, partnerships, and lives. And I gave you clues to all of this earlier on. So tell me what you think are the types that would be more likely to do this.
I'm picking up extroverted feeling from partnerships, harmonious relationships, and helping people. Yep.
Right. So do you know the other letters that might be involved?
I mean, maintaining sounds J. And styles, tools, and resources feels more T to me. But I know it's a little contradictory there.
Yeah. So it's all about the people here. So that's the big clue. So these are NFJs. And so a couple people said NFJ in the chat. That's great. Now this one is based on the innovative nature of what they offer. So I'm seeing NP, NTP, ENTP. Yep, it's NTP. And this was an interesting process to go through, by the way, of coming up with like, what's the thing that distincts, you know, so I'm assuming most of you know what a USP or unique selling proposition is in business. It's kind of your thing that makes you special and wonderful and against all your other competitors. And I started to see patterns in that as well, as what was it that people were distinguishing themselves in the marketplace with? How are they saying, I am more wonderful, more special, different than anybody else out there, particularly in the area of consulting, because consultants and coaches are just a dime a dozen. There's so many of us out there. So based on their ability to apply esoteric theories in the process of discovery that supports clients in healing and overcoming. All right, you all are good. Okay, good, great. So yes, it's NFP. And so this one is based on the level of experience, demonstrated expertise, and reliability of their tools. Yeah, so yeah, very good. So it's STJ. You're also smart. You didn't even need this quiz. So based on the logical practicality of their product or service and how clearly it offers a useful solution. Yeah, great. STP, look at you all running through this. Based on how well they take care of the needs and interests of their customers. Okay. Yep, SFJ, very nice. And based on their ability to attend to the physical and health needs of their clients. Yeah, SFP, and then of course we only have one left. So based on their level of competency and focus on the scope of vision for transforming the environment. Yeah, very nice. So the reason that I decided to write these out this way is that when I work with customers, or when I work with my clients on coming up with their USP, I don't necessarily want to prescribe their business based on their type, but I found that type helped them get to the language that would make them distinct in the marketplace. And so these are very broad, right? So you can take this and be very much more specific and get into the details of all of it. But I really wanted people to be able to say, okay, there's a starting place that I can work with. And if that resonates, particularly if that resonates with me, then I'm going to work with that and build on it and make it my own, make it unique to what I do. But what I find is that when, because of all the ways that people market themselves, it's fascinating. And I'm one of those people who, whenever I see a new theory or a new book or somebody talks about leadership in a particular way, I'm always curious about what their type is, because I really believe our type bias just bleeds through everything we do so much that, whatever I think works in the world, it should work for you too. And I'm as guilty of that as anybody else, because, I've been writing this book for solopreneurs to help them launch, and I realized, right, that's how I did it. It doesn't mean it's going to necessarily work. I mean, I have good ideas and I've taught business startup for years, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be perfect for everybody else. And it's been really good, sort of a good humility practice to say, oh, right, just because it worked for me doesn't mean it will work for other people. This all makes sense to you folks? Okay, great. I want to talk a bit about superpowers and bozo powers, because this is pretty central to what I work with. And one of the things I work with people on is to understand, if you know your type and it really resonates, and you embrace it, and it really helps you understand yourself in the world. Being the ENFJ I am, of course, I want them to understand themselves in the world. Then really lean into your superpowers when you're launching. Trust those. And I run a challenge called the Business Roadmap Challenge. I'm actually just in the beginning stages of the current one right now. And one of the themes throughout that is I want people to understand that they actually have the information right now before they do any more research. They already have the information to write what I call a roadmap. And it's really just a kind of a sketch about where they're headed. It's not the details, it's just the sketch. And also to keep your sense of humor, that your bozo powers will really may derail you. So I was just coaching actually another ENFJ, for example. She's just barely starting as a coach. And she's had a long career as a professional, and now she's starting a business. And she's completely overwhelmed by, you know, what credit card processor she should use, or what online scheduler she should use, or what she really needs on her website. All these very specific details, and they're all technology related. And she was in meltdown the other day. She was completely in meltdown. And I said, first of all, take a breath. Like, just, whoa, like, calm down. This is an area that's a stretch for you. So regardless of her type, if she was that overwhelmed, I said, slow down. This is a stretch for you. This is an area where you just need to give yourself a little more space, a little more humor, and give yourself the ability to recognize that you're just not going to be great at everything, and it's okay. And what I've also discovered is that you will likely attract customers that have a very similar type as you in the beginning, because what you're selling, if you're a solopreneur, particularly, and you're in the professional services, what you're selling is you, like your wonderfulness, your qualities, your unique selling proposition. And so people who want that will come, and they're often going to be very similar types as you. I found for myself in my business that probably for the first 5 years, it's still very much, my individuals are very much INF types, intuitive feeling types. But it was amazing how many people I worked with who I thought I knew statistically there weren't that many NFs on the planet. And that was what was coming to me, because the questions I'm offering, the inquiries that I do, the types of services I do, or the kinds of things that other intuitive feeling types also were interested in, and they want help with those things. It was only after about being in business for about 10 years that I saw my clientele change dramatically and broadened. And that is true as you grow your business. You want to watch your tendency to overuse your superpowers. Because if we we trust them in the beginning, because it's what's going to get you, it's what's going to get you off the blocks and kind of get you moving and through those first phases. But if you rely too much on them, you might hang out in one of those stages too long. You might ignore some things. You might not address, for example, for me, I might not get into technology. I will go on the record right now in front of you that when email became a thing, which was new when I started business, email didn't exist. Everybody had a fax machine. When it became a thing, I remember saying, it would be a fad, it would go away. And like, nobody can exist now without email, right? So I was completely resistant to all of those technology pieces, because they weren't my comfort zone. And I was overusing my superpowers in that way. I just thought I would compel people to communicate with me because I was so wonderful. And what I really found is, and this is true for folks I work with who are in the more mature stages of this, is you need to develop your bozo powers in the service of your superpowers. So I've learned all kinds of technical things because I needed to, but they were always in service to my superpowers. And what I call my superpowers are my dominant, my auxiliary, or my heroic, and my good parent, depending on which model you're using. And these are the things that I lead with, and that they're my comfort zone. And the areas where I'm a bozo really particularly are the areas, if you're using the BB model, that are way down in my trickster and my daemon. Like, those are areas that are real blind spots for me. My trickster is introverted sensing. And I tell you, introverted sensing kicks me in the butt all the time. But I have developed a lot of skills in it because I have to in order to be functioning in my business. And I've always done it in service to my superpowers. And you'll find that when a wider variety of types are using your service, this indicates that you have really grown, and you're probably past the real startup phases, and you're getting into the later stages of growth and into maturity in your business. And then as your business matures, understand that the phases of growth, understand the phases of growth, understand that those exist, they're natural, and watch your tendency to be attracted to one over the others. And then as your business matures, hire out your bozo powers whenever possible. Now, there's certain things you're always going to have to do, but really, I'm not a big advocate of suffering with your bozo powers, because if it is not something that's essential that you must have, that it has to have your fingerprints on it, hire it out. And this is actually a good goal or the idea for growth is that whenever you can afford it, hire out those services, those things. Because, like for me, my Superpowers are bookkeeping and financials. Like early on, I know how to do it. I can do it. I do not like it. It takes me 3 and 4 times longer than anybody I can hire to do it. It's worth it to me to pay someone. A database entry is, again, I had professional jobs where I was the database person for a business. It was a bad fit for me. It's just why I'm no longer in those jobs. I know how to do it, and it is a bad use of my time and energy. It is really a bad use because it takes me so long, and it is the last thing I will do. So if you have those kinds of things in your business that are just like you are the last thing you want to do, they take so much energy from you, you just can't. You just hire it out, because there's always somebody that's willing to do it, even for the price you're willing to pay. So those are my hints and tips on superpowers and Superpowers. And just remember, be the superhero you are. You know, claim your superpower. I love superheroes and their stories and their origin stories, and all of them have foibles. Every one of them are amazing, just like human beings, because they're just archetypes, right? Types are archetypes, and so are superheroes. I have to say, I'm just going to say, I watched the corniest movie, but it was such a great superhero movie last night when I was taking a break from conference things. It was called My Super Ex-Girlfriend. It's a totally silly, corny movie. It's kind of a little bit of a rom-com with some superhero stuff mixed in. It's funny and it's cute, and it was a great superhero origin story of how this woman became a superhero. So just they're everywhere, right? So remember, lean into your strengths. This kitty's only superpower was his organization. Don't overuse your superpowers. This is Clark Kent. He's in it for his eye exam. Remember, as Clark Kent, who's also Superman, he's not supposed to show up as having X-ray vision, and here he is reading right through the wall and showing it that he has X-ray vision. Always let your true self shine through. So whoever that is, let it blaze out, because that's part of what's going to make you special and unique in your business. And remember, being heroic can be exhausting. So Batman and Superman are having a beer, and Batman says, it's exhausting. You take down one arch enemy and another one pops right up. And Superman says, I hear ya. If it's not kryptonite, it's kryptomorrow. It never ends for a superhero. So I'm aware of our time, but here's what I'd love to hear is that you're either in the chat or take yourself off mute and tell me one thing that you think, I'm going to use that. That was useful for me. I'm going to be able to apply that. And please always know that you can follow up with me. My email's here on the screen. And I'm pretty sure the conference delegates, so we all shared our information. So please feel free to contact me with questions or insights. But please let us know what you're up to. What are you going to use?
I like the descriptions of the different judging functions and how it's like a menu of all the bozo powers I can develop. Yeah, sounds
I love it. Okay, good.
This is Molly. I like the idea of looking at the stages of growth through my own type and other types.
Very nice. Okay, good.
Markey, I loved everything that you've said. Made such sense. But the one thing that made sense to me is pricing so that everyone can access your service. I do that all the time. I'm just going to stick to one price. Wonderful.
Okay, good. All right, great.